I will preface this by saying I've quit so many things in my life. I'm a very well-seasoned quitter.
Love it.
Winners never quit, and quitters never win.
Quitters win all the time. Let us show you how on Quit Happens.
Hey guys, before we start the show, I just wanted to let you know all the places you can find Quit Happens and Quitting by Design and all things strategic quitting. You can go to Quitting by Design on Instagram, Quitting by Design on Facebook, LMORSKI, that's L Morski, on Twitter, or my website, which is quittingbydesign.com. Now, that sound you hear behind my voice is the Native American flute played by today's guest, Andrew Belinsky. I hope you like it, and I hope you like our chat. Andrew has really done the work. He has done self-examination to the nth degree, and it's now his passion to help other people examine their lives and bring themselves to better places. So without further ado.
Hey everyone, it's Lynn Marie here. Thanks for joining us for the next episode of Quit Happens. Today we're back in San Diego, and I am lucky to have with me Andrew Belinsky. He is currently the creative genius behind Namastage. Thank you for joining us, Andrew. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
It's my pleasure. It's an honor to be here, Lynn.
And Andrew, I'm going to let you explain what Namastage is.
Namastage is where music and healing intersect. Namastage is an interpretation of my greatest passions and inspirations and my purpose for being here on this planet. I am a yoga teacher and I am a music facilitator. So Namastage containers are a place for wholesome and connected fun, expression, and healing, often in the group setting and also in private and program workshop experiences as well.
Andrew and I met when Andrew was facilitating one of these group activities. It was actually, I believe, a drumming paint workshop of some sort 2 years ago. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. That was actually one of the first Namastage official events. And thank you for bringing that to my recollection. I actually had forgotten where we met. So
That was it. I was like checking my email, and the art place had sent, I forget, is it called, what's the name of the art place?
Expressive Arts on Thorn?
Yes.
Yes.
They had sent an email saying like paint and drumming workshop. And I was like, how many more things that I love to do can you put in one evening? This is great. I mean, like, are we going to do some yoga and capoeira at the same, like, it just too many cool things. So I was intrigued and I had to come, and there you were facilitating it. And I was like, this is super fun. And I still have that painting on my wall that I made from that night. So thank you for that experience. That was very cool. And just to tell you all how Andrew got on the podcast, I had asked people for suggestions of, who they knew that had quit strategically. And this is how I learned about Andrew's backstory in the first place, because I hadn't previously asked what he was doing before Namastage. And as you out there probably have realized, most people have a backstory, especially, when you get into your 30s. Pretty much everybody's got a backstory of some different life. So if you'd like to take us through a little bit about your quit and what you were doing previously.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will preface this by saying I've quit so many things in my life. I'm a very well-seasoned quitter.
Love it.
And probably the biggest quit I ever put myself through was quitting the music industry. I essentially began my journey as a touring signed music producer and performer when I graduated university and I moved to Korea. And I moved to Korea with my bandmate from college. We were in a college band called Phallus in Chains.
It's amazing.
We were a 90s cover band. We were kind of like the original 90s cover band that came about kind of before the 90s was even a genre. So this was at UC Berkeley, and we had great success. Actually, I probably was the most financially abundant in that cover band than I was even as a professional quote musician.
Wow.
So that was a great experience. And at the end of our college years, instead of playing Collective Soul and Radiohead and Savage Garden, there were a few nights where we started experimenting with original music. My bandmate David and I, David Dahlquist, we didn't really know where we were going next or what the next plan was. And so we decided to make a leap and move to Korea, teach English there, and work on our first album together. In Korea, we made quite a name for ourselves and made a really wonderful album. Our project back then was called Swing Set Committee. Our success with that band got us signed to a label back in the States, got us our South by Southwest show, got us a CMJ show in New York City, and took us on a tour around Asia and then back to the USA. So we decided to move to Brooklyn and to really get serious about working on music. It was really between Brooklyn, LA, and Austin. And Dave and I both being from California and not being completely burnt out on the big city life yet. You know, we were a little bit dazzled by the prospect of living in New York City. Brooklyn is where a lot of our inspirational music influences were coming from. I was in New York City for 3 years, focusing on music production, audio engineering, and building the band and building the fan base. So like so many artists in New York City, really committed to my craft and willing to do just about anything to find the momentum and to find the truest expression, and to find the fame and the money. And basically 3 years just disappeared for me. Just right into the portal. Before I knew it, I was working 40 hours a week in food and beverage industry just to support my music habit, isolating myself every night, just really pushing myself and breaking myself. And so I started developing some poor habits living in New York City, and coming back to San Diego to visit for winters, I would just realize, oh my gosh, just the vibrational difference between San Diego and New York City. I was getting closer and closer to giving up my dream. I just wasn't seeing enough movement and enough success, what I thought was success in New York City. And there came a point where I actually was offered a management position with Iron Chef Morimoto's restaurant company.
Wow.
And I knew that this was going to be a great opportunity and also a great energy and time sucker. So that opportunity really faced me with the reality of the situation, which was, okay, if I stay here in New York City, I take this position, I'm going to be here for years more. Yeah. And it forced me to just reevaluate why I was even there in the first place, which the only reason why I moved out there was to develop myself as a musician, as an artist. And I was not progressing in a way that warranted me staying there. It wasn't feeling right. And it was the hardest thing in the world for me to say, I've had enough.
Yeah.
And, it's time for me to take care of myself. It's time for me to get out of these habits of over drinking, smoking, instead of actually figuring out what was going on with myself and my health and looking into what my next chapter of my life could be. So it, of course, was a winter. I was back in San Diego. I was escaping the cold and the snow. I was on the beach shirtless, and I was like, okay, this is it. I am done with New York City. I miss my family. I don't want to admit defeat. I don't want to be a failure, but I have to give up. I have to give this up. I can already tell my body is breaking down and falling apart from sitting in a chair and just, working day in and day out. My lungs are hurting. My nerves are being frayed by the city. I didn't know what was next for me. And I definitely didn't want to come home and admit that I did not succeed as a professional musician, artist, producer in New York City, but I didn't know what else to do. So with my tail a bit between my legs, I drove all the way back across the country and moved in with my dad.
Oh, awesome. Okay. We're going to stop right there because you've said so many things that I'd love to touch on and ask more about.
Mm-hmm.
First off, you're a great storyteller and I could just listen. I'm like, what comes next?
Thank you.
This is a total pleasure to have you. When leaving New York first came into your head, were there physical or mental symptoms? What kind of signs started putting that idea in your head?
Oh, that's a great question. I was so out of balance and so disconnected from my true self being my body, my energy, my mind, and the patterns of my thought and behavior. Probably the number one thing that was a good tip for me to realize that it was time to shake things up was when I reevaluated the purpose, my goal for being in New York City, which was to follow my passion as a musician. When I looked at that, I started paying more attention to what the musical process was looking like for me. And as I looked at myself in my quote, passionate work, I started seeing that I was no longer having fun making music.
Wow.
I was stressing myself out. And I was not really getting along well with my bandmates either because I wasn't in a good place personally. I wasn't creating inspiring work. So I guess the first symptom for me was that the thing that originally inspired me was no longer inspiring me. It was mundane. It was repetitive and rote. It was now a source of pain for me. So, I mean, that alone was like, newsflash.
Yeah.
But there were other things that went along with that. You know, my love life. I wasn't embodying my power as an impassioned blank, an impassioned human, an impassioned music maker. I was not really being present. So I wasn't making great relationships, business relationships and intimate relationships. I wasn't feeling connection to the earth and the planet. So there was this disassociation that was taking place, and I was self-medicating heavily using alcohol, marijuana, and tobacco. And like even that was becoming boring and dull. I got into this cycle of self-medicating in order to calm my nerves from a day of work that didn't fulfill me, and then waking up just feeling like crusty and nasty and stressed about money and stressed about not being in a place of alignment with my true soul purpose. There were a lot of symptoms, but pain in my world and pain in my body and a decision not to feel. That was a big thing. I started feeling less.
Wow.
I stopped singing, which was a crazy thing too. You know, I went so deep into the musician hole and so deep into my craft as a music producer that I was no longer embodying the music.
It was
and everything
just like a rote job.
It was a rote job. It was calculated. I'd pick up the guitar and, you know, instead of feeling the wood of the neck of my guitar, instead of listening deeply into myself to see how I can play it in a respectful way, I was calculating and just not feeling the spark of enthusiasm that an artist should feel.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And the other part about, and thank you for sharing that. I love that you touched on the reevaluation of goals, because that's a huge part. I think a lot of us get into situations with a goal, and once we reach that point, we may continue to use the goal as a justification for chugging forward until you reevaluate that goal and you're like, what am I doing that for? I can identify recently I was in a second job outside of medicine, and it was 30 hours a week. So it was taking up any spare time I had. And so I wasn't able to focus on the quitting business, the podcast, et cetera. And I kept saying, but I've got to keep doing this because I really want to do election reform. You know, it was a job in election reform. And then I once stopped and I said, no, you really want to bring strategic quitting to the world. Like, you want election reform to happen and you're happy to volunteer with that on the side. But like, your main passion is bringing quitting to people. And so stop, and like, why are you spending the majority of your time on something that's not your primary goal? So I totally identify with that. And I also love that you straight up identified this was essentially a giving up / failure. You used both of those terms. And that is super hard quit. There's like a hierarchy of how hard quits are in my vision. And I think identity quits are super hard, and quits where you have to say, look, guys, I'm giving up. I have quote unquote, failed, which essentially is you have not achieved whatever this goal was that you went out there for. How did you talk to yourself about that? Because all quitting is, the fears in our head, is self-talk of some sort. I mean, sometimes people have external talk, like from partners or parents or society. Well, if society's talking to you, it's probably your head telling you what you think society is saying to you. Right. But what kind of, I always used to say, like, mental gymnastics were you going through? Were there fears associated with this, and how did you combat those?
It's a good question. I think I'm still doing the gymnastics even now. It's hard for me to remember back. This is about 4 years ago.
Okay.
It's hard for me to remember the talking that I had to do to myself, the meditating that I did. In a way, I didn't process that until later. In a way, I knew that my health and my sanity was on the brink. And so really the conversation I had with myself is, what's more important, my health and my sanity, or saving face and making, and working hard at this for more years and struggling for more years. So, kind of balancing those two realities.
Yeah.
That was a pretty easy decision to make at the time. The other way that I was able to rationalize this was there was this sort of like precipice, or there was this gap that took place that gave me, at least like a week to feel into the right choice that I was to make. There was a longer term conversation. There was many months that I started feeling like, might be time for me to reevaluate. But really it wasn't until I did some deeper work where I was able to actually feel strong enough in my conviction to quit. And one thing that helped me in a huge way was men's work. So,
I would love for you to expand on that for the audience.
Yes. So men's work, it can look like a lot of different ways to gather in the brotherhood. A very well-known organization is called Mankind Project. Mankind Project is a rite of passage weekend for men. It is based in warrior initiation. It has Native American circle work as well as group psychotherapy collaborations in it. It just so happened that a few friends that I had been connecting with right around the time where I quit were part of this organization. And in this weekend experience, I went to West Virginia for a weekend. And what we do in these groups is we essentially learn that it is okay to feel. And we learn about things like emotional literacy, about how to vision and create a personal mission statement, how to embody our power, our truth, and to be a man among men that, and be somebody that we're proud to be. I was able to unpack through that really powerful weekend experience what I was holding inside and what was stuck inside of me. So the community of men gave me the courage I need in order to face myself, first off, as an addict, and second off, as a person who's living in an unfulfilled way as far as career was going at that time. So men's work helped me, as well as giving up the need to do it all on my own.
Yeah.
So I opened up to my family. It wasn't fun to have to go home and live with my family, but it was the right move at the right time. And, I felt very fortunate that they received me. Yeah. So I think the men's work, lots of conversations, late night conversations with my family, with my friends, with my peers who I respected. Those were two important pieces to me, getting the gall to quit.
Yeah. That's a good way of putting it. It takes some gall. It does.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you shared the men's group. That's something that I think maybe those of us in Southern California are slightly more familiar with. But even, as a female, I don't know exactly what goes on in them or how they can be helpful. But it sounds like they helped you. Was that where you ended up reevaluating your goals, or had that been a process that was ongoing prior to that?
Yeah, it was a process that was ongoing, but really the process up until that point was me sitting in my windowsill smoking a spliff at midnight, processing the day and thinking, wow, I don't have any other way that I know right now to process my stuck emotions. When I saw how vibrant and inspired and sensitive these men were who had taken this program, it was just like, oh, well, that's exactly where I need to go. I want some of that. Then I was held, and I also witnessed other men being held and going through transformations. And I learned from them just by sitting in circle and hearing their stories. I learned that basically I had not felt anger. I had not allowed myself to feel anger my whole life. I always was Mr. Nice Guy, smiley, happy-go-lucky, which is a great thing. However, there's a time and a place to feel and process our own anger. And part of our issue as men and as in this Western society and in society at large is that we don't process our emotions, especially our anger. And then our anger gets balled up inside of us and it comes out of our ears and it hits, our girlfriend in the face, right, or it hits our children in a sensitive place. So I learned that I had been suppressing my anger and my sadness and my shame. And I started allowing myself to feel where in my body I was keeping those things, which was in my gut, in my throat, especially. So learning how to let that shit go, let that shit out.
Yeah.
And how that's a healthy thing. That helped unblock me and helped kind of create an alternative to self-abuse. And that kicked off my self-care ritual. And that's where I am still going and where I landed from that quit.
Wow. I love the term that you used, self-abuse, because I think that's a great description for the negative self-talk that tends to keep us stuck in situations. Like, I can't leave this because I haven't achieved such and such, or I can't leave this because other people will think I'm a failure. All that is just self-abuse. I read something recently where somebody had stopped doing that because they asked themselves at some point, what good has ever come from me speaking negatively to myself? The answer is usually none, unless somehow that's your source of motivation, like run faster, whatever. But I think for the most part, it's just abusive. And I love that you came to terms with that and found a way to use self-care instead. Like, it's a whole new life when you're not abusing yourself and you realize, hold it, quitting can be a form of self-care. It's one of my favorite forms of self-care, right? Like if whatever you're doing isn't working for you, quitting is your new best friend, strategic quitting specifically, to bridge you to that better place. Like it doesn't matter how many massages you get and how much meditating and journaling, if you're in a situation, be a job or relationship or even a city, like you were saying, New York, that's completely wrong for you. It's hard for the rest of the self-care to take as much effect as it would if you were in the right situation.
Amen, sister. Amen. I personally think the number one determinant of happiness in anyone's life is, are you filling your time with activities that light you up? Period. Do you feel like your work is worth something? Do you feel like your purpose is in alignment with your daily energy output? And it's so heartbreaking for me to look around and see people that you can just smell it. They're just so in the rat race and just so stuck in a life cycle that is not lighting them up.
Right.
And this is part of human evolution, of this planet, I think, that we're going through right now. There's some serious darkness. There's some serious negligence for Mother Earth and for our own wellness and health. But then at the same time, there's a new generation, not that new. We're just carrying on these messages of unity and joy. But there is this new generation of people that are being born with parents that are raising them in a way that are instilling these values of self-inquiry, self-care, self-realization. I believe myself to be a part of this next generation. I feel very fortunate that I was able to quit in the first place and supported by my mother, my father, my grandmother. I'm so fortunate that I'm not still paying off student loans, that I'm not in debt, that I don't have so much pressure to run the family business. It's a privilege what I have chosen to do. It also requires a lot of personal work, but I realize that I'm very privileged to even have the opportunity to quit and try something new. At the same time, it's also a very humbling experience. And I've had to give up a lot of my autonomy and my independence and live in my old bedroom at my dad's house and, live in a temporary housing situation in a bedroom converted from the living room,
Yeah.
So it does require giving up and sacrificing some things, but there is no way I would have found my real grown ass man place in the world if I didn't take that leap and sacrifice these things and do Vipassana 10-day silent meditation, take time off and go do a yoga teacher training, and dedicate my time to staff one of these men's weekends. So it's been a whole convergence of sacrifices that have led me to find my truest incarnation as a yoga healer, as a music facilitator, and as a small business owner.
Wow. I love the grown-ass man that you have become. You're a total inspiration. And again, you just covered 400 things. One thing I want to get back to before I forget, you said something near the beginning that so resonated with me. I often use city, where you're living, as something that may be in need of a quit. And I haven't yet run into anybody who's given me such a good example. But you said New York City, living there, the vibration. And then you talked about having frayed nerves. And I often think that when you're in a place that's overstimulated, I now live in North Park, San Diego, which is kind of hipster, but not super overdrive. And I used to live in downtown. And I remember hearing some kind of study that said, like, when you live in a downtown, just walking a few blocks, there's so much sensory input and so much, like, you have to watch out for that car and watch out for that other person and don't step on that, pothole and all these. It's so much extra work for your brain that your brain is like constantly on high alert. And I bet New York City is just like that on steroids, living there as long as you did. And so I appreciate that you mentioned that New York City or a city of any kind can lead to just fraying your nerves, just being there, just the vibration, just the lifestyle pace.
Yeah, I'm very sensitive to that. I've always been a very earthy person, and, being from San Diego, there's always at least been the ocean and the beach to decompress at. It became apparent pretty quickly that the city was not really a great fit for me. I knew that the city wouldn't be a forever thing for me. I will say, though, San Diego is really sorely missing parks, especially where you're at in North Park. You can go to Balboa Park, but Balboa Park is a tourist attraction.
Right.
Right now, as we speak, I'm looking out at the ocean. I see dolphins.
Oh, my gosh. Where do you live?
I'm staying temporarily in Solana Beach.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, this is just like for a week. It's amazing.
Gotcha.
But I can feel my whole nervous system has shifted over the course of this week. An important part for me is just taking 30 minutes every day and taking off my shoes and standing in some dirt.
Yes. You need that grounding.
I need that grounding. I do. The earth is there for us to just shake and to bounce and to dance and to roll around and to release the traumas and the overwhelming sensory overload that is daily life. So I'm constantly, going to trees, going to the beach. That's my medicine now. And that's taken the place of smoking and drinking for the most part.
Yeah.
And so, I just think it's such a challenging time for our kind, our species. We're congregating more and more in these cities where, the 3 bedrooms are becoming 4 bedrooms. The 1 bedrooms are becoming 2 bedrooms. We're cramming in. We're, everyone's got a car. We're isolating ourselves in cars. So we're really losing touch with simple things like, oh, there's stars in the skies at night, or, oh, the sun is out and is warming this planet, and I'm so grateful for that. That's the greatest lesson. Nature and being outdoors and giving myself time every day to decompress and meditate and, do yoga and feel that sense of connectivity and oneness. That's going to help me to die with grace.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. 2 other things you mentioned before that I wanted to bring back up. You mentioned privilege. And I do love addressing that because I never want somebody to listen to this podcast and think I can't do what they're doing. I don't have that privilege. It's not that I don't want anybody to think that. It's that it actually just kind of like hurts me to think that there are people that may think that. And that's a reality. For example, not everybody has a parental unit of some sort they can move back in with, or even maybe a friend circle big enough to move back in with. And so having the gratitude that you did to take stock of the fact that I had been fortunate enough to have the things in place that let me quit. I had a supportive family, supportive friends. That's really important in the quitting process to have them and to be grateful for them in that process. And I've told my parents a million times, like, thanks for never questioning my quits. It's just huge in my development that you didn't question when I decided it wasn't working for me. You weren't like, oh no, but we spent a bunch of money on this college or whatever like that. Though my dad did say at some point when I switched from multimedia to medicine, he's like, now we've already spent one education. I'm like, no, I got this one. Don't worry. But you also mentioned that it wasn't necessarily glamorous. Like you had to do things you didn't necessarily envision in your giant plan as moving into your dad's place or being in temporary housing. But that when you compare that with the person you can be when you take those comfort steps backwards in living situation, but comfort leaps forward in getting to be who you are. I think that's a crucial realization. We get really focused on creature comforts. I'm no different. But then at what expense? That you have this nice condo and this stable living situation if you're miserable 40 hours a week in the job that's letting you have this condo kind of thing.
Yep. At what expense? That's the question. It doesn't matter how privileged or, how hard life has been for you. The question is, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to evolve as a human being, in order to not be stuck? Because being stuck is, in the cycles and the patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior, and just endlessly doing the same things that bring you pain, that bring you suffering. That is true insanity. So at what cost? What are you willing to give up in order to create space to do the deep soul searching to find what your purpose is on this planet? Dude, you don't have to have like the $1 million business plan. You don't have to have the social capital or the business investment plan all set up. All you have to do is take a little bit of time and space to be quiet and to be still, and also to dance and to sing and to play and to get back in touch with that childhood, youthful enthusiasm for life, and see what the seed of that juiciness is. What is it? Is it making other people laugh? Is it cooking delicious food for your friends? Whatever it is that brings you true joy in your life, you just start a podcast about that. And it doesn't have to be right away that replaces your day job, but that will augment your reality and augment your happiness and add to the joy, and it will start to transform you as a person. And then over time, naturally, these jobs, these tasks that are meaningless to us, they just naturally fall away. It's been a pretty long-term process for me developing my business. I created my business, Namastage, a little over 2 years ago now, and it's changed its tagline and its motto and its brand many times, and I do still have to work side jobs in order to support myself. But the jobs that I'm working on the side now are increasing in alignment with the work that I'm on this earth to do. The pay is increasing. The hours are becoming more flexible. So it's like every time I quit, I replace that job with a side job that's a little bit more juicy for me. I'll keep quitting. I'm going to keep quitting, for as long as it takes. I'm going to keep changing and morphing and evolving, because that's the only thing that we can be sure of in this life, is that everything is impermanent. So I'm not attached to the outcome, and I'm looking forward to the next quit.
I love it. I love it. Andrew, you're amazing. Everything about that. I dig your use of evolve. That I often say, if quitting as a term is somehow frightening, use transform or change. Use evolve. Like that's absolutely what evolution is, how evolution works. And yeah, it's just a sequence of quitting until you know more about yourself to know what the next thing should be. And then quitting that because you know more about yourself. Like, you're not the same person you were yesterday. And you definitely aren't the same person you were 5 years ago. And you won't be the same person in 20 years. So why is the same situation going to work for all those? It's not. Speaking of evolution, if somebody in San Diego would like to have you as a participant in their evolution through Namastage or any of the work you're doing, where can they find you?
Yeah. My website is namastage.com, and I also teach weekly yoga. I'm currently teaching in North County, mostly Tuesday and Wednesday evenings. Tuesday evenings at Inhale Yoga, 5:30 to 6:30, and Wednesday evenings from 5 to 6:15 at Foundation Yoga. The yoga that I teach is in the lineage of Krishnamacharya. This is a therapeutic style of yoga, simple postures and very much about the breath. And we use many limbs and tools from the yoga toolbox, not limited to physical postures and gymnastics like much of Western yoga is, but also using breath practices, our voice, reading and chanting Sanskrit texts, and then, wait for it, meditation. Oh my goodness. There might be some silence in my class. I do bring in the music medicine facilitation principles into my yoga classes, and that's kind of the unique thing of what I offer. But we can essentially use the parts of music to help us to understand the conscious and unconscious patterns of our life. I offer one-on-one packages as well as group online programs and workshops as well in the San Diego area. And I would love to empower your voice, and I would love to help you to embody the musicality of your life.
Fantastic. I'm just empowered listening to you speak. You are so in line with your passion, and it's so inspiring. And I hope everybody feels that same sense of inspiration, that you can be at a point where you are self-medicating in a city that's fraying your nerves, and there's something on the other side, and it just takes doing some of the work. And I just love that that's now your purpose, is helping other people do that work so they can come to the other side where you are, where they are in line with their passions and not fighting against it every day. And they're much closer to being able to realize their true selves and their true happiness. So I cannot thank you enough for sharing your story with us.
It's a beautiful blessing, and it's been an honor. And yeah, thanks for doing this work. This is really crucial work for our civilization at this time. There has to be another way.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And thanks for being part of helping me show people there is another way.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, until next time, everyone, I usually say happy quitting, but in honor of Andrew, this time I will say happy evolving, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers.